Education. Education is the most powerful tool with which you can change the world. Education is moving from darkness to light. It's the foundation that builds countries, societies, and the world. It builds our future. To lay emphasis and build a strong foundation for the edifice of education, we have esteemed guests and dignitaries with us today. As I introduce them, ladies and gentlemen, I request you to put your hands together to welcome them. From the Diva Patil family, we have with us Honorable Chancellor and President of Diva Patil University, Navi Mumbai, Dr. Vijay D. Patil, sir. Please put your hands together as we welcome him. We have with us on the dais Honorable First Lady and Managing Trustee of Diva Patil University, Navi Mumbai, Srimati Shivani Vijay Patil. We have with us Honorable President of Ajinkya Diva Patil University, Dr. Ajinkya D. Patil, sir. And we have with us our very special guest for today, a dynamic young leader who believes in touching the hearts of the youth, Honorable Member of Parliament, Shri Varun Gandhi ji. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together as we welcome Shri Varun Gandhi ji. As we commence with today's program, I request all the dignitaries on the dais to light the lamp of knowledge and enlightenment. I request our student council members to escort them. As we move ahead, I take this opportunity to present a brief introduction of Shri Varun Gandhi ji. Shri Feroz Varun Gandhi is a second-term Member of Parliament who represented the Pilibhit constituency in 2009 and was elected from the Sultanpur constituency in 2014, winning both elections by record margins. He was the youngest ever National Secretary of the BJP from 2008 to 2011 and the youngest ever National General Secretary of the party from 2011 to 2014. He is also a member of its national executive. Shri Varun Gandhi has been a member of a number of parliamentary standing committees, including those on defence and external affairs. He is also a member of the Executive Committee of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association. He is a widely respected opinion leader and policy analyst, writing widely in English for The Hindu, The Economic Times, NDTV, and subsequently in Hindi for Amar Ujala, Navbharat Times, Rajasthan Patrika, and Hindustan. He also writes in other important regional languages for Lokwat, Vijayvani, among others, making him the widest read columnist in the country, reaching over 200 million readers. A poet by inclination, he has published 2 best-selling volumes of poetry titled as The Otherness of Self and Stillness. Stillness broke sales records, becoming the best-selling non-fiction book of the year 2015, selling over 10,000 copies in the first 2 days of its release. He is currently working on his 3rd book of poetry titled Surrender, while also traveling extensively to research for a book based on developmental agrarian economics, which seeks answer to the fundamental question, what is the economic future of Indian villages? Both these books are due for release in 2018. He has also pledged to start a subaltern movement that would aim at ridding many farmers of their immediate debt as soon as possible, while creating a program for them and ensuring that they do not fall back into the debt. With all these efforts, he has ensured that over 4,700 farmers become debt-free. His latest initiative, Sapno Ka Ghar, is to provide permanent structural homes to people who have never owned a house or lived in them. He started with a personal donation of 100 homes in his constituency of Sultanpur. As previously done, he seeks to broaden his base into a movement, planning to once again travel and crowdfund nationally this time around in order to build 1,000 homes by the year end, reaching out to the local elite as well as large farmers. He aims to provide the homelessness with a psychological and material cushion against being completely ravaged by poverty, while also providing them with a sense of honor and a sense of community. Shri Varun Gandhi ji is here today with us for a talk as we prepare for tomorrow, as we take a new leap in innovations and reforms in the education system. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together for our esteemed guest for today, for all his achievements, all the accolades that he has received in his career. I now request President of Ajinkya D.Y. Patil University, Dr. Ajinkya D. Patil, to offer the opening address.
Yes, so I completely agree with that statement. Yeah. So I seek the blessings of Sri Satya Sai Baba. May the Almighty bestow all His blessings on this lovely gathering that has come to receive our dear Sri Varun Gandhi ji, the Member of Parliament. And I'm truly delighted that he's here, because he's been earlier at our Pune campus, and I think he mesmerized the crowd with his speech, with his views, and various aspects of the functioning of Indian society, as well as some interesting insights into how the social fabric of the nation is. So I'm quite keen to hear him for the second time, and I believe you should also hear him, because truly to get a speaker of such repute, this university will be very happy to hear his address. Just for the brief for the people who have not known about the D.Y. Patil group, I would just like to say a little bit about the D.Y. Patil group. Since Sri Varun Gandhi ji has come here to the campus for the first time, so if you just give me a minute to explain. I think my father started this group in the year 1983, but before that, several years ago, he had this vision to start these educational institutes. But the environment in the Indian subcontinent, or rather in the state of Maharashtra, was not conducive to starting of these private institutions, because private institutions were looked upon in a different manner from the academics, from the people, from the public, and even from the perspective of the government. So in a sense, it was sort of a struggle for my father. I call him a great man, because I think because of him today there are thousands of engineers, thousands of doctors, thousands of graduates that go out into the society. They're an educated mass, they're an educated lot, which offer the output to this nation. So I think it was a great struggle that my father has given to this nation. And I speak a little bit because he was also friendly to your father. He has a great opinion about him. He has great regards for him, for the entire family, for the entire Gandhi family. And in fact, he called me today morning and asked me to remind you about all his early memories with Sri Sanjay ji, who was a great leader, and we have his able son amongst the audience. So that's a little bit about him. He's founded 5 universities which are based in Navi Mumbai, Pune, Kolhapur, and also in the Caribbean now. We also have international schools overseas, all over India. So the brand is growing, developing, evolving, so we continue to grow in the education space. We also have now 3 large hospitals of 2,000 beds capacity each. So we would have a bed strength of more than 6,000 beds combined. And Varunji, these hospitals provide almost free sort of healthcare treatment to the needy and deprived. It's almost at par with municipal rates, or sometimes even lower. So I think that was a mission given to this group by my father, that if you're going to do something for society, this is a way of giving back to society. So I think at the end of all this, mic is going a little loud here. His vision was always to do something for the people, that any business empire you create, any social empire that you create, or anything that you do should touch the lives of the people, as to how it could enrich the lives of the people. And I think that DNA is ingrained in every team member of the D.Y. Patil group. So I think that's something we are very, I wouldn't use the word proud, because that's not what he taught us. I would say that we are humbled with all the support that we get from the entire D.Y. Patil team. We also have the International Cricket Stadium, which you just walked through, and that was a vision fulfilled by my brother Vijay, because he's a passionate cricketer, and in fact to such an extent, when I think there are test games or IPL games, I think his office stops working and he's glued to the television sets. But it was just the dream of the single man, because my father, when he told him that you have to build this stadium, I was a bit concerned because the viability of a stadium, making such a gigantic structure, making it feasible was a huge challenge. But then I think he believed in the words of my father. He believed in the power of doing something, and he just embarked on creating this stadium. And bit by bit, because what you see today here is established, is developed. But I think when you see and remember the days, he got his feet wet in the mud. You know, he was at the stadium at 3 o'clock in the morning, building, working with laborers, sometimes eating with them, sometimes celebrating with them. I think the joys of constructing something, and when that dream really truly comes true, is something which we all look forward to. And I saw that twinkle in his eyes when the first IPL game was inaugurated at his stadium. So, but again, I think I speak a little bit about the family because people don't know much about the family. So I think I speak on behalf of my brother because that's a dream that he has created. And as my father has contributed to the development of the nation, I think to sporting, my brother has given a magnificent monument to this great country. So Vijay, that's a great stadium that you've built. So I won't take too long here because we are all excited to hear Sri Varun Gandhi ji. But just before going, I always say that we are currently in the span of a very technological revolution, and I think technology is pervading every aspect of our functioning. While it's improving the quality of working, while it's connecting people, I think there is a lot that we as humans also need to reconcile and look at. We have to introspect. Because when you open the newspapers or you open the TV channels, I think we are portrayed with a lot of negative news. We are portrayed with a lot of violence. We are portrayed with a lot of hate. We are portrayed with a lot of jealousy. And I think these are the core aspects that create divisions in society. Because we are talking of an India which will be beyond. We are talking of an India which is going to be a great nation. We are talking of an India which will compete with the great economies of the world. But to do this, I think we have to be one united India, because we can't be divided on caste, creed, or religion. At the end of the day, I think there's unity in diversity. And I say this because when you come into a campus, in a campus, a student does not come from any particular religion. His religion is all equalized. So in a sense, he's levelized in a university campus, or he's levelized in a school. And that's the beauty of the education system. Because when you come into that environment, you all become one. And I wish that we could learn a bit from the youngsters, from the children of today, because I think the adults can learn more from what the young, innocent minds have to offer us. So this pollution that we have in our mind, I'm not talking of the pollution in the environment, I'm talking of the pollution in the mind that has to be eradicated, the pollution of hate, the pollution of pride, the pollution of fear, that has to be eradicated. And one must think about how we'll help our fellow humans and how we achieve happiness and success. I'm also sometimes shocked and amused in the way educational institutes sometimes are treated. And sorry, I'm being a bit emotional today, but like I said, that there is so much hard work put in by my father, by my grandfather, by Vijay, by the entire family. We have his lovely wife along with him, and I think they put their heart and soul into these institutions. And when I walk today into the hospital, I just wonder, because so many times we face these problems with the various councils that comes for inspection. And the Medical Council of India has been doing inspections for the hospital. And sometimes their report says that we don't have adequate patients, we don't have adequate equipment, we don't have adequate staff members. And I think it's a bit shocking, because if you're going to remain in the regulatory framework, there is very little creativity, there is very little ability that you can explore, because you're more tied in the mundane activities of trying to fulfill the compliances of the various statutory bodies. So I think there has to be a radical change in the way education has been given in our great country. There has to be change in the way governments think about these educational institutes. Because there is also a big debate about these educational institutes being only for the rich, by the rich, for the rich. But I disagree with that. There are various formulas that can be implemented where a lot of needy people can come into the system. Since the 1970s, my father has been advocating scholarships for 25% poor students in the country. He says that if 25% of the seats are given to the needy and deprived, say at a fee of 1 rupee, And the rest 75%, there is a rich class in this nation, there is a middle class in this nation. They can cross subsidize this education for the poor. So what happens is every 4 institutes that a private entrepreneur sets up, 1 institution is created for the poor, 1 institution is created for the government. So I think we need some visionary leaders to look at these processes, to look at these systems. And we don't give up, because every time we progress, I think successive governments have been trying to improve the educational system. They've been trying to make the policies and friendly to educators. And it's a big market. I just don't talk in terms of social entrepreneurship, because there are a lot of investments waiting to come into the education sector. And it should just not be one DY Patil or one Patangrao Kadam or one Manipal. There should be hundreds of such institutions available to the people of India. With technology, schools can reach the villages of India. And I think when we have global aspirations, I think first we have to look at our local aspirations. We have to look at our local goals. Because still a great part of India is in poverty. A great part of India is unemployed. A great part of India does not get food to eat, does not have a roof over its head. So these are basic necessities of nation building. I think if we can provide them with the skills that will at least give them a decent accommodation, a decent amount of living and some income, then I think truly as a nation we would evolve. So I think I can go on about social entrepreneurship, because I'm very passionate about this. So like in the words of my father, he says that I started with a dream, maybe you'll complete that dream. If you don't complete that dream, your children will complete that dream. If your children don't complete it, their children, and the journey must go on. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening to me, and I welcome Shri Varun Gandhi ji to our campus. Sai Ram.
Thank you very much, sir. I now request Honorable Chancellor and President of Diva Patil University, Navi Mumbai, Dr. Vijay Patil, sir, to felicitate Honorable Shri Varun Gandhi ji. Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together as we traditionally welcome Shri Varun Gandhi ji. We present to you a small memoir to take back home with you from the Diva Patil family, touched upon with great warmth and gratitude.
I'm just looking at everybody standing there and the lady standing here and thinking for the next 1 hour it's going to be very difficult for you to keep standing. So you might as well find a place to sit, or else scooch up on that sofa right there. Honorable Dr. Vijay Patil ji, Honorable Dr. Ajinkya Patil ji, Mrs. Shivani Patil ji, Dr. Shirish Patil ji. I want to thank all of you for being here today, and I'd like to thank Dr. Vijay Patil ji for allowing me the privilege to come to this esteemed institution and to share my thoughts before you today. And I'd like to thank all of you for being here. You know, when we look at education, unfortunately, we look at education in the ingestion of sort of allopathic didactic method. We look at education as the gaining of information. But when we look at education in a holistic manner, in a nation, in a society, it creates its own energy and it has its own method. And that's what I want to talk about today. Earlier, when Flipkart was acquired by Walmart, a question came to my mind that how come Amazon was number one the minute they came into India? They were number one on day one. In fact, they obliterated the competition completely. Over the summer, I was in America and I had the opportunity to meet Jeff Bezos. And I asked him, I said, you know, I found it very strange that when you went to China, you did very badly. But when you came to India, you were number one on day one. So how is that? And he said something very interesting, and I want you to listen to this because it may help you. He said that we hired 3,000 people in India 8 years before we launched. And we only hired them to do market research. That's it. Because we wanted to know the Indian environment, we wanted to know the psychology of India, we wanted to know how people would view us. And he said this is what we learned. We learned A, although there are lots of smartphones in India, they are cheap. They are under 4,000 rupees, 5,000 rupees. So the capacity of memory in that smartphone is very little. So what we did was we made sure that our app was very light. Otherwise, if the phone crashed when you put it on, nobody would put it on again. The second thing is, he said we were very conscious that the trader community in India is very powerful and very united and very vocal. So if they came on the streets against us, we would be thrown out of the country sooner or later. The third thing he said was that we shouldn't be seen as an imperialist force. We shouldn't be seen as an outsider coming in and grabbing Indian jobs. And to this order, he did two things which I found were quite amazing. The first is there's something called Amazon Tatkal. So when you get on the app, even as a businessman in Navi Mumbai, within half an hour, you can start actually selling your business, selling your wares on the app within half an hour. There's no great paperwork required. There's just an authenticity certificate. And the third thing is, in fact, I went to a market in my constituency, which is a very small place. And I asked them, I said, are you afraid of Amazon? Do you feel it's killing your business? And they said, no, it's increasing our business. I said, how come? They said, because Amazon in India pays every shopkeeper as an intermediary 5% of total gross sales if, in fact, they log on and cooperate. So as a handling fee, so it's a win-win situation. Now, I thought this was an amazing thing because when a company enters a new country and it gets 70% of market share on day one, obviously they've done something that we should learn from. See, when we talk about innovation, right, what does innovation mean to us as young people? Innovation means the appropriation of new ideas to create value in an organization. Now, that organization can be a university, or it could be a country, right? Or it could be an individual business. But the fact is, why is it in India that we've not been able to become comfortable with these new processes, these new systems in times of fluctuation and change? One of the things I want to talk about, to start talk about, is R&D, right? Research and development. So an amazing thing that I saw here today, that I first saw at the Ajinkya Patil University in Pune, and I saw at a much larger and grander scale today, whether it's the lab, the medical lab, etc., the simulation lab, or other things, is that this university is geared towards the future, not towards the past. But in India, this is the exception rather than the norm. So what are the statistics? In India, we have 360 R&D personnel per 1 million people. Just juxtapose that with Germany, which this year is going to have 8,000 people per million. Or even juxtapose that, frankly, with Bangladesh, which is 3,000 people. And the amazing thing about Bangladesh is when you go there, they are very keen on the textile sector because that's where they think their core competence lies and their jobs are going to be created. So all their R&D is actually just working in the textile sector, and that's what India needs to start thinking about. In the Global Innovation Index report, 30 years earlier, we were number 22. Today, we're number 61. Right? What is the reason for this? So one of the reasons is the lack of spending on innovation. So how much do we spend on R&D, right? So we spend 0.6% of GDP. Countries like South Korea, Israel spend almost 5%. But even countries like Sri Lanka spend 2.5%. So really, do we need to start spending more and betting on the future? India has the largest amount of startups in the world, but we also have the largest rate of failure of startups in the world. It's 92% of failure of all startups across the board. Now, what is the reason? The reason is very simple. According to this year's NASSCOM report, they say the reason that startups are not succeeding as they should is because people who invest in startups in places like America and Germany and England and Singapore have a gestation period of about 10 years. Whereas people who are investing in startups in India want the startup to make money on day one, which is frankly unreasonable and impossible. So they start pulling out money within year 3 or year 4 if there isn't a lot of profit to be made. This is a failed strategy for a country as a whole. See, we have startups in India, but a lot of them are copies. So we have Ghana for Spotify, or we have Ola for Uber, or we have Oyo Rooms for Airbnb. But we don't have meta level startups. We don't have a Baidu, we don't have, Alibaba, we don't have those kind of startups. And because, we're not innovating while we're creating. We're preparing for a marketplace, but we're not preparing that baby to actually grow up and start running, much less anything else. Is it a failure of investing in education? I don't think so. I think it's a failure of appropriating that investment. We spend 3 lakh crores on right to education in India, but 89% of all that money has been spent on building buildings. Now, we all know why politicians love to build stuff, so I don't want to get into that. But I will say this, right, which is when you go to a village and you see a school, like a big building, it doesn't mean anything if there are no teachers, right, or there are bad teachers, I want to get to that later, or there is nothing happening there, or there is no transportation facility from the village to that school, then all that will happen in that school is at election time politicians will give speeches in it, and otherwise the villagers will get married in it, or occasionally people will get fed in it, little kids, and that's all that's going to happen. We have 700 universities in India, right? But if you look at QS rankings, if you look at any of the rankings, I was looking at the Telegraph rankings in England last week, the highest rated Indian university this year was the Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore, and it was 172. Even a country like England, which is a small, tiny country, a country like France, has 5 institutes. Frankly, I haven't even heard of 5 institutes in France. So obviously, we don't only have to scale up, we also have to skill up, right? And the government and the private sector need to work together and not look at each other, as you said, as adversaries. How many researchers do we have in India? Right? We have 160 researchers per million people in India. America has 5,000. Why do people not want to get into research in India? Because this is the key to job creation in the future. Because it doesn't pay well. The average tech scientific researcher in India gets paid between 2 and 4 lakh rupees a year. Frankly, that's not a lot of money. An average researcher at the top 50 universities, not top 5 in America, gets paid over $130,000 a year. Right? So if you can afford to lead a life of dignity while doing something good for society and being passionate, that is actually the ideal mix. The other thing is that in India, all our research is based on esoteric, peer-reviewed technical journals. In America, in Germany, all over the world, in Japan, in China, it is industry-linked. So if you are doing research in biochemistry, you will have to prove that research at a pharmaceutical company. But if you're doing research in IIT in biochemistry, the only guys who are going to read your research will be some professors in your department. Nobody's even going to hear about it. So unless we start linking our research to job creation, to industry, to reality, it's going to mean very little. In fact, C.V. Raman, Hargobind Khurana, S. Chandrasekhar, all these great scientists did all their research abroad. That's not a very good sign for India. Also patents, right? So all of you know what patents are, right? Have any of you watched a show called Shark Tank? So if you watch Shark Tank, right, the first thing that they'll ask you is this product patented? Right? Vijayji, have you seen Shark Tank ever? You must see it. And so the first thing they ask you is, okay, you've made a new way to, cook bread. Have you patented it? Because patenting something in today's day and age means protection, right? All of you have heard this phrase that India is a sone ki chidiya, or was a sone ki chidiya. But do any of you know where this phrase comes from? Do any of you know? It comes from Vasco da Gama. Because when he came to Goa, he said this country is like a golden bird waiting to take flight. Right? And why did he come to India? He came to India for the calico. He came here for the cotton, for the silk, only for the textile. He didn't come here for the Goan beaches. But textile 400 years ago, very few people know this, was 44% of total Indian GDP. 44%. Today textile is less than 2%. If you go to Chanderi, if you go to Mangalgiri near Guntur, if you go to any of these places where handloom was, in Mangalgiri in 1975 there was 130,000 families that did handloom. Today there are 2,000 families because it doesn't make economic sense. And why is that? Because we have not patent protected that product. So any guy from Chengdu or Wuhan from China can come, take a snapshot, upload it on WhatsApp, and just steal the product that day itself and make it cheaper. So we've got to start protecting our own people. In India, the astonishing thing is that 89% of all patents that are in India every year are by foreigners. I never knew this. 89% of them are by foreigners. So it's not even our people who are getting stuff done. Last year in India there were 1,400 patents granted. In America there were 67,000 patents granted, right? Now why is it that nobody goes to patent a product in India? It's because in America the average timing of granting your patent is between 4 and 7 months. In India it's 6 years. Now the crazy part about that is that imagine if you have a technology, right? If it takes you 6 years to patent that technology, it will become obsolete, right? The next wave of technology will have hit by then. So if there's such a delay in the filing and execution of patents, no country can ever become a tech superpower. All we can do is low-end tech then. All of us hear about young people, hear about youth. But which youth are we talking about and where are youth going? Today there are 13 crore people in India between the ages of 18 and 30 who have no job, who are not educated and have no vocational training. None. 13 crore people, that's 30% of all young people. And even of the people that are supposedly employed, 60% of them are self-employed, right? 30% have casual employment and only 10 to 12 people are formally employed. So what does that really mean? All of us hear about the IT industry, right? Many of you here are going to go on and work in the IT industry. This is the third successive year in India where IT jobs are down. So I was giving a lecture at the National Law School in Bangalore 2 weeks ago, and I went to Infosys and I met them and I said, why are your IT jobs down? And they said, because, and they showed me an IIT report. And that IIT report said that of 36,000 engineering students from the top colleges, only 4.8% knew the level of tech that they needed to survive in that new technological infrastructure. So what did they want? They want data science, they want machine learning, they want cyber security. But today a lot of institutes are not teaching that stuff. A lot of institutes are giving degrees in engineering and technology, but they're teaching low-end tech, which frankly can't get you a job anywhere anymore. So as educationists, all of us need to be up to our toes all the time to prepare for the future, not to be content with the present, because the present doesn't remain the present for very, very long. When I want to raise an important issue today, which is, does privilege perpetuate privilege, right? So if you're moneyed, if you're privileged, if you're advantaged, does that ensure that you remain and your children remain and everybody else is boxed out? So is that a major issue for us to think about as young people and as somebody leading and directing change in the future? So Jack Ma, who started Alibaba, I had the privilege of meeting him, and I said that, did you have an easy ride to success? And he said, you know, the national exam, which is the exam you have to take for further studies, for college in China, he said, I failed it 4 times in a row. And he said that all of my friends saw in Hangzhou, a city where he was from, that there's an ad for KFC. KFC's got 25 jobs going. And he said 26 people applied. I was the only one that got rejected from a KFC job, right? So it's not a great job. But you see, Jack Ma is the exception rather than the rule. What is the reality? So at Harvard University, right, 60% of students come from a family median income of $270,000 a year. That's a hell of a lot, right? Only 3% of students come from the bottom 25% of America. Only 3%. And that's the bottom 25%, not the bottom 3%. So in India, what is the most coveted job? Tell me, what is the most sought after job for a normal person? An IAS job, right? For a normal person, a government job is a big deal, right? It's security, it's prestige, it's honor. So who gets these jobs? So this is a statistic. 84% of all people in the IAS, 84%, have studied in the top 25 cities of India, right? This is a country where 73% of India lives in rural India, and 84% of those people who make policy for them and govern them grew up in the top 25 cities of India. 66% of all IAS officers went to private school, right? Went to a posh private school. 21% of them went to convent school, you know, which are even more elite. 70% of all IAS officers have a postgraduate degree. Now, who has a postgraduate degree in India? 1, somebody who can afford it, and 2, somebody who can afford to spend the time on higher education, because frankly, everybody can't afford to do it, right? So you can see that even in an IAS officer, people who claim to represent the middle and lower middle classes, even this is a group of people who come from entrenched privilege. When we look at inequity, even at a school level, right? I'll get to university next. So in India, we have 15.5 lakh schools. But only 1.2% of these are what you would call the posh boards. So the CBSE, the ISC, the IB, It's just 1.2%. Everybody else is studying in a state board, right? But when you study in a CBSE, the average fees per year is about 50,000 rupees. This is not counting clothes, books, additional expenditure. How many people can afford it, right? You've seen the Tendulkar committee report that the average income of India is about 5,000 rupees a month. So a person who's earning 5,000 rupees a month, or frankly, who's even earning 15 to 20,000 rupees a month, it's difficult to spend about 70, 80,000 rupees a year on your children because your savings as it is so little. The Supreme Court, like your father's vision, which you said, the Supreme Court in its wisdom said that 25%, in 2012 they said that 25% of all seats have to be blocked for people from disadvantaged economic backgrounds. But this year's NCPCR report, the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights report, says that only 29% of those seats remain filled. Now, there are reasons for this, right? So, if you look at, as I'm saying, this privilege, entrenched privilege, right? So, let's look at IIT, right? IIT is supposed to be meritorious, right? It's supposed to be just the cleverest of the cleverest. But who gets into IIT? So 93% of people who got into, I got that statistic wrong. 63% of people who got into IIT last year got into just IIT from two boards, CBSE and ISC. 63% of people. That means that, frankly, if you get more money for a better education, you have much more of a success rate going forward. I mean, that's 1.2% of India. That's it. Got 63% of the seats in IIT. Right? Now, even when you sit for an IIT exam, most people take coaching, right? It's incumbent upon you to take coaching because the exam is very hard. And the coaching normally lasts about 2 years. It costs between 2 and 4 lakh rupees on average. How many people can afford that? So 12 lakh people sat for IITs last year and only 11,000 people got in. So everybody else that actually financially stressed themselves to get their kids to study were left just with loans. And nobody's talking about this. Everybody talks about NPA, but nobody's talking about education NPAs. So there's 67,000 crores of education loans in India and 6,800 crores of education NPAs, education non-performing asset loans. And I can't be surprised, because if I'm a poor farmer or a middle-level farmer who, spends 2 lakhs or 3 lakhs to make my daughter a nurse, and tomorrow she just doesn't find a job, or she finds a job where she's earning 5,000 rupees a month, then I cannot pay that loan back, and it goes NPA after a while. Arya Prakash, who like Rohit Vemula committed suicide in IIT Madras, I remember what he wrote, and it just made me think that is education, instead of working as an equalizing measure, does it serve actually to perpetuate the divide the way it exists today? And is this something we need to think about? He wrote, and I quote, "Is it possible for a student who has been brought up in a disadvantaged environment in a regional medium to excel in a top institution of the country?" He said that good coaching and excellence in English language differentiate and create a gulf which can never be bridged. He wrote this the night he committed suicide. When we talk about education, right, it's very fashionable to say that, put your children in private school. And let's be honest, private schools are on average much, much better than public schools. But they're also very, very expensive. In the last 25 years, 31% of students now study in government schools in cities, down from 72%, right? So people don't want to put their children in a government school unless they have to, but yet the cost is phenomenal. So I just want to flag a couple of things, which is the National Bureau of Economic Research says that there are 5.7 lakh contractual teachers in India. 58% of them have no degrees. So I wonder what they are teaching, right? And 25% of teachers were found absent in unannounced inspections by the same document. So what is the way forward, right? So very quickly, one is that we always talk about spending on education. We say we're spending 2.6%. What if we spend 6%? It's not going to happen that easily. So why should we talk about dreams? Let's talk about reality. So let's assume that spending on education doesn't increase. What can we do? One, can we create teaching as a year-long externship, right? So if people graduate, or if they're postgraduates in our country, can we make it mandatory? Like in America, in England, now everybody takes gap years, right? A lot of people in India now take gap years after school, but they use it to travel, etc. Can we make it mandatory in India for everybody to spend 1 year after they graduate, graduates teaching students under class 8, and postgraduates teaching people in their local area from class 8 to class 12, right? There would be no shortfall, there would be no shortage of teachers, and those young kids, all of you, would actually see the country for what it truly is, see the challenges. You would be more confident because you would be explaining things, difficult concepts in a simple manner, so you would know it better, your communication skills would improve, and it would also bridge the gap between the life of a have and the life of a have not. So that's something that we can think about. The other things that we can think about is that whether government should be financing education as opposed to providing it. See, all over the world now governments are getting out of education, right? But we're getting deeper in it. So I was in Qatar, and one thing I saw was that in Qatar now there are no government schools anymore. They have charter schools. So what that means very simply is they take people like the family of D.Y. Patilji and people who have a proven track record in education, and they tell them, right, open schools and run them, okay? And we will subsidize the 50% students from lower economic backgrounds, and the rest of the 50% you can charge them normal fees so that your business model is also successful and people from a lower background economically get access to the best level of education. Is this something that we can think about? I don't know, it's an idea. The other thing that we can look at is that, see, we're in the midst of a paradigm shift between how people access information. So we have a tech revolution that has overcome us. We have 300 million smartphones in India, but they're not all really being used for the best purposes. The education apps today are the second most downloaded apps after video games, but ahead of entertainment and business apps. And you know, there are mobile apps like Bijus and Topper and everything that do give you mobile education. But the problem is that the level of rural participation in these apps is just about 6 to 8%. I was in Africa, and Africa has an amazing app called MXIT, right? Mixit. And what it is that Africa, particularly West Africa, which is much poorer, they saw that people were failing mathematics at an alarming rate, right? So what they did was they created a live app where you have tutoring by maths tutors. They got 2,000 people to volunteer, and they did it just in the evenings when students are free, when they have an hour or so. And it operates, and it's obviously it's a live chat session, etc. And they found that people, countries where maths was being passed just about 25%, the next generation was passing maths at about 90%. So we need to now institute non-formal education also. Because let's be honest, the curriculum in our country is theory heavy, right? All of it doesn't have a practical output. But let's say if in North Karnataka you were a shepherd, right? Would your children have the luxury of attending a formal school 100% of the time? Probably not. In Senegal, they started a program called Tostan, which is, like I said, non-formal education. And so they teach their children, along with math, science, English, etc., they teach them income generation, and they teach them human rights, and they teach them health habits, right? And a person goes to live in that village for 3 years, and just to teach the people in their own syntax, right? Not in a imported kind of urban manner, a facilitator. In Paraguay, they have something even more interesting in South America, which is that there's something called Fundación, which is foundation, and what it means is that each school in a rural area also functions as an agri-business. So their motto is learning by doing, selling, and earning. So they work half the time and they study half the time, and they have 50% of stake in the profits, right? The teachers and the students. So they all and I went to one of these schools. Someone works with coir, someone works with leaves, somebody is doing something else, somebody's making herbal products, depending on the area. And it was amazing. I went to one where there was only girls, and they were just making all sorts of jams, jellies, condiments, and they were earning while they were working, and so they were a great asset even to their families. So is this something that we can think about? Another reason why education in rural areas in India is not working is frankly hunger. Now, a lot of people sitting here have never probably been hungry, except for now. A day in their lives. I promise to conclude quickly. Not that quickly, so be hungry a little bit more. So when I was an MP in Sultanpur, which is a poorer area than the first area I was an MP from, I would go to villages, and my colleague Captain Sandhu there, and I would go, and we would go, and people would, I would just look at how, people had their bones sticking out, and they looked, really starving, and I would say, Bhaiya, and I would ask them about this, and they would say, yes, we are desperate. And so we started something over there. We got an industrial refrigerator, we got an industrial kitchen going, and we just asked all the dhabas and the canteens, the hotels and the motels and marriage halls, we said, whatever food you're going to throw away the next day, can you give us that food? And we'll clean it, and then we'll make something very simple out of it, like dalia or khichdi or something, and we'll give it to people the next day. And then we had another idea, because it was a little complicated, because we would get a little bit of dahi and a little bit of aloo, and it wasn't working out that easily. So we said we'll start a roti bank. And Vijayji, if you can start something like this here, it would be fantastic. Which is, I just ask people that, look, many times you make a little more rotis than you can eat, so you throw it, or it gets stale or bad or hard. So if you can, would you just give me whatever rotis you can, nothing else? Today we're getting 25,000 rotis a day, right? And we're feeding 4,000 people every day for free. So, it goes hand in hand. And I tell you, the villages that we are sending food to every day, I can tell you that their education rates, their enrollment rates are shooting up. Because when people's stomachs are full, that's when they start thinking about gentrifying themselves in other ways. I want to flag a couple of issues about healthcare, since this university has done such great work in this field, right? So per capita expenditure on healthcare in India is just $61 a year. Just compare it with Brazil, which is about $1,200 a year. India loses 6% of its GDP because of health, and so obviously this affects education and everything else. But the most important thing is that 75% of all health infrastructure in India is in cities, whereas 72% of people live in villages. Thing that needs to be looked at again. The most cruel site that you see in Delhi is All India Medical Institute. I don't know if you've had a chance to see it. In front you have thousands of people, the best hospital in India, just except for DY Patil, of course, the second best hospital in India. And otherwise I'm not going to get lunch, so I better be polite. And so you have all these people lying on the streets, and there's 1.3 lakh cancer patients, only 20,000 of them are admitted. There are only 30 beds for chemotherapy. So we really need to think about capacity building. And a cruel joke is that even you have to wait there on the streets for your own death. It's such a terrible thing. But really what we need to look at is permanent health care. So 86% of people in rural areas and 82% of people in urban areas have no health care insurance whatsoever. So frankly, if one person in a family gets ill, the whole family's savings go. And all of you know this, right? If one person in your family gets ill, costs you 5, 10, 20, 30 lakh rupees, and all your savings are completely gone. So we really need to look at this very carefully. I just want to briefly touch on environmental injustice, because environment is the issue of our times. And many people feel that the environment is an elitist issue. In fact, it's the opposite. It's the poor people who suffer the most every time. Next door to Delhi is a garbage dumping yard for the satellite cities of Gurgaon and Faridabad. And it's called the Bandwari Waste Treatment Plant Estate. It's 30 acres. Every day 1,100 metric tons of garbage are dumped there. For the last 6 years, it has not worked for a single day. How I found out was, and I had given this example when I had come to your place, that two people from my constituency, actually from a nearby constituency, came to see me, and they said, we're brothers and we're 30 years old and we have cancer. And I said, that's extraordinary. How did you manage to get cancer at the same time? They said, because we work in this village. And when I visited that village, there are two villages, Dera and Bandwari, on its periphery, they have a 90% incidence of cancer. Even 4-year-old kids have cancer. And this is just negligence. In Hyderabad, the biggest industry in Hyderabad is generic drugs, right? So 30% of all generic drugs in the world come from Hyderabad. But when I went to Nalsar, the law college, and I said to my friend, Professor Faizan Mustafa, I said, Professor, could you take me to the Musi River? And he said, I want to take you to the Falaknuma for lunch. I said, no, I want to go to the Musi River. And he said, it's not like the Thames, like there's nothing to see. And when we went there, I kid you not, it is red in color. Like it's worth seeing. The Hindu did or the Hindustan Times did a full-page story on it. And I was so appalled. And what is happening is the generic drug companies, cheap drugs, they're just putting all their liquid waste straight into it without any filter or treatment. And the Supreme Court twice has reprimanded them, but to no effect. And why I heard about this was the University of Leipzig in Germany did an extraordinary report which showed that 100% of the fish in the Musi River have both female and male genitalia. Because when you mess with nature, nature messes back with you. So when I saw it, there are 100,000 people that live near the Musi River in Hyderabad, and it is the largest cancer circle in India. So 75% of people there have cancer. So these are the issues we want to, should be talking about. I want to briefly talk about cleaning up politics, because unless that is done, the rest of this, frankly, doesn't amount to anything. I want to talk about, everybody talks about corruption in India, right? But there are two reasons that I can understand after having been an MP for a decade as to why corruption really happens. One, elections, right? So without getting into the semantics of it, Norway has a very interesting thing. They don't control the amount of money you can spend on an election. You can spend any amount of money. But elections are end to end 1 week, and you're not allowed TV advertising, you're not allowed to put billboards or hoardings, you're not allowed to advertise in the newspapers, you're not allowed to have more than 5 cars in a constituency, and no public assembly of more than 500 people is allowed. So frankly, it forces the candidate to not only go door to door, but it forces him to fight on a level playing field. Because frankly, everybody can afford all this stuff, right? It's in India, a lot of corruption is happening because that money is then used to get re-elected for a person. It acts as a fortificant. And this is something that we need to look at. The Election Commission needs to be strengthened. Because today, frankly, the Election Commission cannot even file cases after an election is over. It doesn't have any power really. Only one party has been de-recognized in the history of India for not giving its campaign funding patterns, and that was late P.A. Sangma's party, National People's Party, and one day after they gave it, they were recognized again. So unless you punish offenders, the system will never ever change. The other reason corruption happens is because there's no transparency of information in our country. Let's say there's a road being built from here to Lonavala or wherever, right? And you see that that road is not being built correctly, like there's faulty material being used. Nobody knows who the thekedar is, right? Nobody knows who the construction person is, the contractor is. And even if you know, can you get access to them? Let's say you go to the local municipality or the police or whoever, and you say, listen, this road is not being built, I'm a citizen, right? It's my road, and can you put this? He'll say, please stick to your own business and mind your own manners. This is not your concern. And that's the truth. So in Europe, they started something very, very interesting. And what it was, it's called Monithon, Monitor and Marathon. And what it is even 1 penny of money that the EU gives, European Union gives, whether it's for a port or a bridge or a road or a hospital, real-time expenditure is on Monithon. Please check it out, check the website out. So for instance, let's say they're building a bridge. So they will tell you this bridge is to be completed in 340 days. Today, this is the amount of work that was to be done. This is the amount that is actually done. These are the names of the labor that are working. This is how much they're getting paid. Can you imagine in India, if all information was transparently available to you and I, don't you think it would make people's life difficult to steal after that? Right? Because that's what's happening in India. It's not that, it's that nobody knows anything. Information is so opaque that frankly anybody can do whatever they want, and this is something that we need to look at very, very strongly. The other thing that I want to look at is, what kind of, politicians and politics we want to see forward. I've been an MP for 9 years, and I've probably the only MP that in 9 years I've never taken a salary from Parliament. And I, every month, I send a letter to Parliament donating it to an organization, NGO, or person in need. And I wrote a letter to every parliamentarian who had declared assets of more than 25 crore rupees. And you may have heard about this, and I sent them a letter, and I said, please voluntarily give up your salary. Because if every MP and MLA in India that has declared assets of more than 25 crore rupees voluntarily gives up their salary, it will save the country 500 crore rupees a year. I just want to say that I never heard back from any of those MPs or MLAs, and after that I wasn't a very popular MP in Parliament. I felt also that it was very important to talk about another issue, which is how MPs and MLAs would increase their salaries at will, right? So how does a teacher at DY Patil increase their salary, right? It's tough, right? How does a person working in a hotel or in a railway station or in a government job or anywhere increase their salary? It takes time. You have to prove yourself, you have to petition, the management needs to see value in you, whatever. And how does an MP or an MLA increase their salary? By raising their hands, and it's done. Salary increase. 4 salary increases in the last 5 years. So finally, I got up in Parliament and I said, listen, it's a country where 20,000 farmers are killing themselves every year. Government statistics, not my statistics, right? And we really should be thinking about this closely, right? Okay, if we feel that we're underpaid and we want to get paid more, fine. But there should be a constitutional body that is appointed to look at whether we deserve it, look at cost of living, look at standard of living. The way to increase our salaries cannot be just raise your hands in 2 minutes and you've got the salary increase, right? That's immoral. It's unfair. We need to start pushing the boundaries. See, why have I come here today? I've come here today, I have won an election from a place called Sultanpur. But I'm not an MP of Sultanpur. I'm an MP of the Union of India, right? And as much right as the people of Sultanpur have on me, that much right all of you have on me. And I've come here today because everybody today is geared towards the next election. Politics is just being geared towards the next election. The time has come where all of us start gearing ourselves towards the next generation. And that is something we really need to start thinking about. Because if it's just election after election, who's going to start planning for the India of our dreams, the India of tomorrow? I really thought I would get some claps on that, but I'm just teasing you. So we need to look at, see, one of the things that I was looking at recently is that, I went to my constituency, the last one, and I remember I went to a village and they said, do most of you understand Hindi? So I went to a village and they said कि भाई साहब आप हमारे लिए क्या करोगे? अगर आप जीतोगे तो क्या करोगे? So I noticed that the drains were very bad in that village and water was flowing on the main road. So I said मैं आपके नालियाँ ठीक कर दूँगा, क्योंकि आपके गांव में यदि कोई बारात आए या आपके रिश्तेदार आए तो पानी आपके घर के सामने बह रहा है, ये उचित नहीं, अच्छा नहीं लगता, तो मैं ये नालियाँ ठीक कर दूँगा. So one poor man stood up, old man, and he said, भाई साहब अभी तो एक आदमी आए हैं, उन्होंने कहा कि साहब हम पीलीभीत को पेरिस बना देंगे और आप तो कह रहे हो हम नाली ठीक कर देंगे, तो हम किसको वोट दें? I said, भैया हम पीलीभीत को अगर पीलीभीत ही बना देना तो उतना ही काफ़ी है, तो पेरिस तो बनेगा नहीं. And this is the reality. So what I want to get to is a lot of politics today has become about saying the easiest thing to win. Just saying the easiest thing and winning. Political parties' manifestos, right, are full of things that can never be done. All of you know it, right? Even they know it. But the problem is not the students of DY Patil and me, because we are educated enough to know right from wrong, truth from lie. The problem is that when a person sitting in Nandurbar, right, or a person sitting in Chandrapur, who is not educated, right, who is living as a very marginal farmer or a labor, when that person hears a person saying that I will transform, Nandurbar into the Netherlands, then that person feels that, okay, maybe there is some hope. Because in India, unfortunately, we're always looking for messiahs. We're not looking for solutions to problems. And I want to say one thing to you today, which is you are tremendously important, right? And I have come here today to put one idea in your mind, and that is the next wave of reform in India is going to involve civic society intervention. Like Dr. Patil talked about social entrepreneurship, right? Social entrepreneurship is a big part of it. But what I want you to do is to raise your voice, not just on issues that concern you directly, but on issues that have nothing to do with you, but that you feel passionate about. How many of you here are on Twitter? So not a lot, but a few. And how many of you are on Facebook? More. So I want you to reach out to me on Twitter and Facebook. My account is Varun Gandhi 80, the year I was born, to tell me what issues you think I should be taking up, to tell me what issues you want to participate in with me, right? So if you're passionate about tree planting, or if you're passionate about women's rights, or if you're passionate about any one thing, right? How can you and I work together in giving you a greater stake, in giving you a more potent voice? That is something that I think we need to do. I was in Brazil, and in Brazil, I noticed in Rio, they have something called benefitoria, which is basically that the city of Rio votes every year for 5 projects that they want commissioned by the municipality. So common people, ordinary people go and give ideas saying we want a sports complex, or we want a park, or we want X, Y, and Z. And then every year in November, the whole city votes. And the one that gets the top 5 votes, they are legally commissioned to then make them. And I thought it was an interesting idea, and if something like that can be piloted here, it would be fascinating. All of you, sometimes have a thought in your mind, which is that I'm only one person. What can I do, right? I'm already struggling for existence. How can I help? I want to give you examples of, 2 or 3 people, and after that I'm concluding. My district is Sultanpur. Next door is a district called Ambedkar Nagar. So in Ambedkar Nagar, one day there was a girl called Shimla Kumari, 24-year-old scheduled caste girl, working as a laborer on a brick kiln, on a eat ka bhatta. And she went there one day and she was thrown out without giving her 2 days' pay. So she went to the labor commissioner, who was a very good officer, and her brother was the clerk there. And she said, "Sir, I want to get my 2 days' pay." And he said, "How much is it?" So she said, 60 rupees a day. And she said, "No, sir." He said, "That can't be true, because did you work a full day?" She said, "Yes." He said, "It's 120 rupees a day, government law, per day of work." So she said, "Sir, for the same work in India, men get 120 rupees and women get 60 rupees a day. This is a fact in Maharashtra and all states in India." And so he said, "This is impossible, this can't be." So he said, "Okay, forget about your money, you'll get it tomorrow. I want you to sit in a car with my 3-4 officials, and I want you to go to your village and take affidavits and sign statements of every woman in your village that is working as a laborer and that has got this much money and how long they have worked, and I will give them their back payments." And she didn't only do it for her village, she did it for 16,000 villages. It took her 2 years. A 24-year-old uneducated girl, and she got 186 crore rupees released to those people. So this is the power of one person, right? Just 2 more examples. This is an educational institution. I always think of Babar Ali when I go. I'm researching. I was researching for a book which is coming out of mine in November, December, which is a rural manifesto decoding India's villages. So when I was looking at village level education, I went to Bengal because Malda and Murshidabad, which had 19% literacy, today have 80% literacy. So I was interested in how this change took place. So I asked the MP and he said, talk to Babar Ali. I had no idea who that was, so I went there. So Babar was a young boy who lived in a village called Bhapta in Murshidabad, and he was the son of a poor jute farmer, and he was the only kid in his school who would go to school, a kid in his village who would go to school every day. But he felt very guilty about it. So every day underneath a guava tree, he would sit and teach other kids what he learned in school that day. Soon his fame grew. So other people came to sit and learn from this 9-year-old professor. And when he became 14, nobody in India had heard of him, but CNN heard of him. And they gave him a Change Maker of the Year award. And they gave him $200,000. Now, anybody else, this was 10 years ago, so anybody else would have spent this money on land, a home, a tractor. But Babar said this money has come from education and it must go back to education. So he built a huge school, like about double the size of this. And he had about 2,000 kids there at one time. And he said that there'll only be 3 conditions. 1, whoever studies will study free. 2, whoever teaches will teach free. And 3, whoever studies there will go back to their village and teach 5 people what they've learned that day, so that the cycle keeps continuing. And it's amazing that when Babar did this, other villages around got competitive and they said, if he can do it, then why can't we do it? So today it's an education hub of about 70 villages which have 100% literacy, and it all happened by one 9-year-old kid. And the last example I want to give before concluding is of Shrikant Bola. So Shrikant was born completely blind, right? And this example is for all of you when you get tired or when you get upset and when you think the world hasn't been fair to you and when you feel that somebody's having it easy. I want you to listen to this example. So Shrikant Bola was born completely blind in the village of Sitaramapuram in Andhra Pradesh, and he wanted to study science in +2. But they said, no, you can't because you're blind. So how will you do the experiments? How will you do the syllabus? So he went to court as a kid in Hyderabad, and the court said, you can study whatever you want to study, right? So he studied science in +2 and he got 99%. After that, he sat for the IIT exam. He got the 13th rank all over India, which is a big thing. He was totally blind. After that, IIT refused to take him. So IIT said, he's blind, how will he bathe, how will he eat, how will he walk to class, how will he attend lectures, we can't have 2 people permanently with him, so sorry. So he said, no problem, I don't want to fight everywhere. So he applied to MIT. And he's the first Indian, not the MIT in Pune, the MIT in Massachusetts. Just want to make it clear. And the MIT across the river from Harvard. And it's a top technological institute in the world. And he's the first Indian to get a full scholarship in MIT. And he studied astrophysics, right? And he's the only Indian to ever top MIT. He got a gold medal in astrophysics. And after he got a gold medal in astrophysics, NASA, Google, Oracle, Microsoft, everybody, the US government, they said, please come and work with us. We'll pay you whatever you want, just come and work with us. He said, no, I'm going to go back to India. That was always the plan. And he came back to India and he started a company called Bolland Industries. Today it's a 500 crore company. It hires 6,000 people. 3,000 of those people are totally blind. So if a person who wasn't even given sight can create light in the lives of so many people, then you and I, who've got every advantage, can do so much more. I just want to end my lecture by saying that, you live not always just for yourself, right? The job of an education is to prepare you not just as a qualified person in a field, but to prepare you for being a good human being. There are millions and hundreds of millions of people in our country who have no voice to fight their fight, right? Who have no confidence to fight their fight. When you leave here today from this most prestigious institution, I have no doubt you are going to succeed and succeed hugely. And all of you will get great jobs, you'll make a lot of money. But in every action of yours, you keep a stake of yourself, of your earnings, of your achievements for that last person in society. Because the aim of life, I promise you, when you're 60 years old or 70 years old and you look back at your life, nobody remembers the cars they had and the money and the holidays they took and the homes they lived in, right? Because these homes and these cars and these holidays will remain memories. But the one thing that you pass on to your children, the one thing that you pass on to your next of kin is respect. That's the one thing you pass on. And being a father of a 3-year-old girl, I can tell you that when my child was born, it changed me, it humanized me. And I thought, I never ever want to make a mistake that tomorrow my child has to suffer because of this, either in my work or in my actions or in my thoughts. And as all of you grow and flower, mature and succeed, I want all of you to have a very large social component in your lives. And that component is not because you are charitable or because you are gracious or because you're great. It's because that is what makes you a human being. And just remember this, that ultimately when you fight for somebody weaker, you're actually fighting for yourself. Because if we live in a country where, as we live today, where 1% of people own 60% of national assets and 10% of people own 89% of national assets, so 90% of people own 11% of national assets, that is a ticking time bomb, right? If you live in a mansion and you have 10,000 slums around you, trust me, one day those guys are going to come for you. So therefore, be kind, be helpful. Kindness is not a passive thing. Kindness is about doing things. It's not about thinking good. It's about helping, right? It can be something very simple, like you carrying biscuits in your car to give to a poor hungry person or a poor hungry animal, right? It could be something like planting fruit trees in this month, because this is the best month to plant trees so that the next generation can benefit from them. But whatever you do, remember that you are extremely important, that your actions and ideas matter, and that the nation is counting on you to be better, stronger, and kinder than the generation that preceded you. Thank you all.
Ladies and gentlemen, put your hands louder together for Shri Varun Gandhi ji. Firstly, sir, thank you for that inspiring speech. You've really ignited the fire in the youth out here. We can feel the vibes, very confident about that, and by sharing your views, your vision, your perspective.
Thank you.
So as you said, the students may be a bit hungry. I was just going to say they are hungry more to interact with you, and we have a set of questions. So the first question is coming up from an intern representing Divapal University School of Medicine.
Sure, yeah. Okay, great. Thank you.
Kindly introduce yourself and ask the question.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Dr. Arham Pirzada.
Hi.
Firstly, on behalf of all the students here, we're glad to have a leader like you in the parliament, and you restore the faith we have in the politicians of the country. Thank you so much for an inspiring speech. So you touched upon the topic of healthcare,
Yeah.
and since I come from that fraternity, I need your opinion on this. That what are the reforms that as a nation we require in healthcare education and healthcare services?
I'm not an expert in this field, but I've written on this. And the thing is that one of the things that we require is a change in our thinking. Because unfortunately, in our country, the life of a poor person doesn't mean as much as the life of a rich person. So if you ever go to have you ever been to any district level hospital? So where are you from originally?
So I'm from Gujarat,
Okay, which place?
Surat.
Okay, so Surat is a pretty developed, prosperous area. But if you go to North India or East India, to Bengal or Odisha, UP or Bihar, and you go to a district hospital, you will actually be really frightened. Right? There are two women giving birth on the same bed. There are people who've just given birth, and half an hour later they are saying, okay, now go, and they're sitting with their newborn like on the floor. So the first thing that we need to do is to focus on rural healthcare expenditure, right? And I think that we need to start very seriously looking at private public partnerships. The other thing, in my limited experience, I can say, along with my colleague Captain Sandhu, we have built the only new district hospital in UP in the last 40 years in Sultanpur. We built it from scratch. And so I'll tell you why it succeeded, because along with the hospital, we've also got a school there, and we've built a colony so that doctors can lead lives of comfort and dignity. Now, if I ask a doctor from Surat to come to Sultanpur and live, he'll say, नहीं भैया, मेरे बच्चे कहाँ पढ़ेंगे, मैं कहाँ जीऊँगा, मैं ऐसे थोड़ी ना जी सकता हूँ, because he's used to a certain standard of. So we need to start looking at hospitals as environments, not just as hospitals. So if you have a hospital with a good school, then it will attract good doctors because their kids can study there. If they can live well, all the better. So we need to, because the problem in India is not physical infrastructure. The problem is that doctors would love to be in South Bombay or South Delhi, right? But they wouldn't like to be in Balia or Asansol or in Dang, or wherever. So we really need to look at this from a fresh perspective.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
So we have the second question coming up from an intern representing Diva Patil University School of Dentistry. Kindly introduce yourself and ask the
Sorry,
question.
what's your name?
Dr. Akshita.
Thank you, doctor.
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Rebecca, and I'm from D.Y. Patil Dental University.
Yeah.
First off, before I start my question, I'd like to say that it was exceptional listening
Thank
to
you.
you speak today.
Thank you so much.
And a lot of things I will think on and I will ponder on for a very long time. So
That gives me a lot of hope.
Thank you. Thank you so much. My question to you is, how would you perceive women contributing to the various fields like politics, education, medicine, and even the armed forces over the next 10 years?
Justin Trudeau has made a cabinet that's 55% women. And when he was asked that, why did you do this? He said, because it's 2017. Right? So I think that I was telling Dr. Shirish Patilji when we were coming here, I have a daughter, and I said that, all I ever wanted was daughters. I didn't really want sons ever, and to be honest. And the fact is that as we get more evolved and as we think about things more, there really is no difference between gender, right? But people like you and people like me need to fight for gender justice every day of our lives, so that the next generation sees more equality. Because let's be honest, your generation has seen more equality than your mother's generation, right? So as long as we keep growing in the right direction, we're headed somewhere good. See, I want to say one thing to you, Rebecca. This country has gone from medievalism to postmodernism in a very short period of time. So there are postmodern strains within us, but there are also medieval strains within us, right? So I live in Delhi, but 50 kilometers from where I live, Khap Panchayats are pronouncing, husband and wife as brother and sister because they belong to the same gotra. So we will have to fight that medievalism, and we'll have to fight it together. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. We have our next question coming from a second-year engineering student representing Diva Patil Ramrao Adik Institute of Technology. Can we have the question, please?
My name is Abhishek Pancha.
Thank you.
And I'm a second-year student from RIT.
And where are you from originally?
I'm from Mulund. It's in Mumbai.
I know where that is.
Yeah, thank you so much. So we all know we are in the.
It's very famous.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah. So we all know we are in the century of computing.
Yeah.
So I'm from an engineering institute. So I believe each and every student should learn, or they should know the basics of computing. So as a young and respected leader, what do you think the resources should be provided by the government in developing the technical skills of the youth?
India, I want to say something. There are 91,000 tech PhDs of Indian origin in America. There are 900 in India, right? Indians are the most brilliant people in the world, right? They're the most high IQ people. We are the most able to understand and decipher tough concepts. If you ever go to America, go to Houston, visit NASA.
Sure, sir.
So if you ever go to NASA, you don't see one white guy in NASA. They're only Indians. Either have I come to NASA or come to Nagpur. So the fact remains that we're technically proficient anyway. We just need to invest in education, and in education going forward. See, Google. So Google is spending now 30% of all their profits in AI, in artificial intelligence, right? So we need to start looking at things like robotics. If you're on Twitter, look at a handle, I think it's called Boston Dynamics, which is just these robots that they're making. And they are unbelievable. Frankly, they're a little scary because they have robots now running marathons and doing all this stuff. So we need to start preparing for tomorrow intellectually. That we can't be teaching stuff from the 70s because it doesn't mean anything. So what I feel as a country, as entrepreneurs, as opinion leaders, we need to do is just look at what is going to be important in the next 10 years and start doing it today.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have our next question coming up from a third-year student representing Diva Patil College of Architecture.
Good afternoon, sir.
Hi.
This is Aisha Nathani, and I am from third year College of Architecture. And listening to you was very great. It was very
Thank you.
inspirational. So I wanted to ask you, so according to you, what do you think is the infrastructural progress in our country? And what do you think should be the developmental focus in the near future?
It's a very good question. Thank you for asking it. What we really need to look at in our country is planning. Do you know something, Aisha? You're in architecture. Do you know how many town planners there are in India?
Not really. Sorry.
I want you to do one work for me.
Yeah.
I want you to find out, just file an RTI, okay? There are less town planners in India than there are in Afghanistan. This is an actual fact, right? So the fact is, in India, we're not even looking at planning seriously. See, who built Chandigarh? A Frenchman. Who built Lutyens Delhi? Lutyens, right? The fact is that we may think that the English looted and cheated us, which they did, but at the end of the day, if you look at a British level of construction, the roads, the dams, the ports, the railways, whatever they built, it's still functioning pretty well today. And I think a lot of that has to do with corruption, but I think a lot of that has to do with planning. So they planned, for instance, big trees by the side of the roads, but they ensured that those trees were local trees. See, if you put a tree from New Zealand in Navi Mumbai, it's not going to grow because it's not supposed to be here, right? So what I feel is we need to look at planning. It's not about what infrastructure needs to be built. Everybody knows what needs to be done, right? There needs to be schools and hospitals and roads and highways, and all that is fine. But we also need to put stuff in that works. I'll give you an example. In Uttar Pradesh, there is a Delhi-Mathura highway, right? And then there is an Agra-Lucknow highway. If you go on those, you hardly see 2 or 3 cars on it. Because nobody in India, we're very price elastic and nobody wants to pay for that stuff. So we need to build stuff, right? But we also need to think it through before we're building it. Otherwise you end up like Dubai, which has got so much excess capacity that half your buildings are completely now lying either halfway through construction or they're just lying vacant. Right? So we make a plan between today and tomorrow, and that plan has to be holistic. It's not just about getting infrastructure up. It's also about looking at what kind of stuff we need, what is the need of the hour, whether it's sustainable. You know, so for instance, if you could look at environmental architecture, right, as your forte, that is the need of the hour. Right? If you look at vertical gardens, if you look at all kinds of different things, I'm sure that somebody like you could make a mark. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. The last question for today, it's by a second-year student representing Diva Patil School of Management.
Hi.
Kindly introduce yourself.
Don't look so nervous.
So my name is Kabir Ghor. I am second year management student.
And where are you from?
I have born and brought up in Mumbai, and my in-laws are, my grandparents are from Gujarat.
And your in-laws, where are they from?
Sorry, it's in France.
Young man, your head is in all the wrong places. You're thinking too far ahead.
Sorry, sir.
Please.
So first of all, I just want to say that it was really
Thank
privileged
you.
to hear the holistic ideas and inspirational examples which you gave us and shared with us.
Thank you.
So my question for you is, there are several disruptions taking place in the education field, such as artificial intelligence, robotics. So how do you think the management students can cope up with these changes which are taking place?
The disruptions of today are the path breakers of tomorrow. So if you don't have disruption, it's, have you heard of Hegel? So Hegel was a very famous social scientist, political theorist. So it's thesis, antithesis, synthesis, right? So you have creation, destruction, fresh creation, right? So unless you have disruption, you will have status quo. And if you have status quo, then you'll be obsolete. So I think it's very important to have disruptive elements as long as they're organically disruptive. Yeah. Great.
Thank you, sir.
With that, thank you,
Thank you.
sir.
Thank
On
you.
behalf of the Diva.